All right, so we're going to be looking at corresponding parts of congruent triangles and making sure that our notation is correct is a big idea here. So if you take a look, we can see that we have sides here that are congruent. We have sides here that are congruent. And then we have this third side that is congruent. And so how we name this is important. And so if we look at how the first one was named, it started with H here and then went in this direction to O. And so what we have to be careful of is that we start in between the two sides that are appropriate. So that would be here. But then we need to make sure that we go along this side here that matches up the correspondence. So the triangle that it would be congruent to is triangle PGI. And that would be by side, side, side. And so now we're going to look at what's congruent. So angle H would be congruent to angle P. Angle O would be congruent to angle G. And then angle T will be congruent to angle I. And all of this is going to be by corresponding parts of congruent triangles or congruent. And so therefore we know that if we are going to want to prove something about either the angles or the sides, that we're going to have to first make sure that we can prove that these triangles are congruent. So if we look at the next one here, let's look at what's given to us. We have a angle right there that corresponds with this angle here. We have a side with this side, and then we have this angle with this angle. And so you can see that what we have is an angle, a side, and an angle, a side, and an angle. And so that is going to be the pattern that we'll use to be able to prove congruence. And then we have to make sure that we get this correct. So it starts here with H and then goes to O. And so we're going to need to make sure that we start here with G and make sure that we go towards P. And so that is going to be triangle GPI. And so angle O will correspond to angle P. Segment OH is where we started right here, is going to correspond to segment PG. And then segment OT, which would be right here, is going to correspond to segment PI, which would be right here. And once again, the reason is always going to be after we have those two triangles congruent, corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. If we look at number 3, we're looking at, first we have a angle. We then have another angle. And then we have a side. Note that that side is not included. So what we have is an angle, and a side. An angle, and a side. So our pattern there is by angle, angle, side. And so triangle HOT is congruent to triangle. So let's see if we start with H here, and then we go O in this direction. That means over here we want to start with A. Sorry, that's a G. Start with G and go in this direction. And so that's going to be triangle GPI. And so looking now, we can see the congruence that angle O is going to correspond with angle P. That segment OT, which is right here, is going to correspond with segment PI, right there. And segment HT, which is right here, is going to correspond with segment GI. And once again, by corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, which we of course abbreviate CP, CTC. And our last one here, if we look at, we have a triangle, we have a side and a side. And so if we look at what we have here, we have a side, an angle, and a side, an angle, and a side. And if we go to do our pattern, it starts up here with H and goes to O. And so we're going to need to start here with I and go towards G. So I, G, P. And segment O, or sorry, angle O is going to correspond with angle G. Angle T is going to correspond with angle P. And then segment OT, which is right here, is going to correspond with segment GP, which is right there. Once again, by corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent.